Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the Complex Trauma Training Center. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Hi, Transforming Trauma listeners. If you're a mental health professional working with complex trauma and are interested in learning the neuroaffective relational model, we're excited to share with you about our upcoming NARM Therapist trainings. The NARM Therapist training is an advanced clinical training designed for licensed mental health professionals, current mental health graduate students, and active clinical interns and trainees, where you will get trained in a comprehensive developmental framework and clinical approach for resolving the long-term impacts of ACEs and CPTSD. As you are learning and integrating NARM, you will receive individualized support from a team of skilled, passionate, and supportive trainers, led by faculty members Brad Kammer, Stephanie Klein, and Marsha Black. If you're working in the field of complex trauma, we encourage you to register now to get trained in NARM. For more information and to reserve your spot, please visit complextraumatrainingcenter.com. And now for our interview. Megan Holm is a licensed marriage and family therapist, NARM Master Therapist, and Somatic Experiencing Practitioner in private practice. She served as a NARM training assistant for 3 years, assisting with both the therapist and master therapist trainings. Megan is currently a training candidate at the International School of Analytical Psychology in Zurich, Switzerland. She continues to see clients in the U.S. working on themes of relationship patterns, belonging, grief and loss, and self-discovery. Please enjoy my conversation with Megan Holm. All right, I'm sitting here with Megan Holm. Welcome to Transforming Trauma.
Oh, thanks, Emily Ruth. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's just a delight to have you. I'm really excited for our conversation today. And I wonder if you could share with us, what would you like our listeners to walk away with from our conversation today?
Yeah, I thought about that for a while, and partly I've been kind of curious and interested in this overlap of NARM, and I'm now studying in Zurich at the Jungian psychology. And the thing I think I'm most interested in that is in both, and that would be a takeaway, is just about seeing ourselves as we really are, not as we wish we were, as we think of ourselves we would like to be, but this way of really seeing ourselves as we are and how unsettling it is. And I think that's a part of NARM and some of these questions of what gets in the way of what we're wanting for ourselves. But that unsettlement, one, to recognize how unsettling, how difficult, and two, also how fruitful, or to the more curiosity about it, and to kind of hold those two things in tension, the reality and kind of the growth there.
Yeah.
That's what's been milling about in my mind.
Oh, I love it. I love that kind of just leaning into and acknowledging it can be uncomfortable and it can be really fruitful. Yeah. Thank you for that prompt. So I'd love to hear, before we dive right into what you're doing in this moment, I'd love to hear a bit about your background, where you come from, what brought you to this work.
Yeah. I studied marriage and family therapy, was the beginning of my kind of therapy journey, which in my program I was exposed to, some like family systems and some trauma work in that, very kind of more from a supervisor than in the curriculum exactly, but I was really interested in kind of relational dynamics, and then also I became much more interested in trauma. That led me to somatic experiencing, and from there I wanted kind of more, I was more interested in some of the less shock trauma things, I kind of always felt interested in this developmental trauma, relational kind of piece, and that's where it ultimately led me to NARM when I wanted to understand some more of that, both for myself and my clients. And so I studied NARM in 2019 and then started working with the Institute. I did some assisting in some of the trainings, and then from there I got interested in depth psychology, and that has now brought me to Switzerland, where there's a full-time kind of immersive program in Jungian psychology. And so now I've been here for a couple of years studying that and carrying on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, the ever unfolding journey. Yeah. So you were always interested in more the depth work and kind of acknowledging there are shock one-time event traumas, but you were noticing, it sounds like, in your work and with clients, that often there were layers.
Yes, exactly. And partly from my own experiences, or when, whether that be ways we feel like outsiders or maybe belonging things in our families,
Mm-hmm.
that was an interest of mine. And I think attachment, kind of things that linked up with attachment, or I was finding it, in talking with clients about relationship dynamics. I think I was seeking something that had that. Somatic experiencing, of course, has some,
Mm-hmm.
but more that it's harder to name or point to as complex trauma is.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the language, even then, I mean, so much has happened in these 15 years. I don't think I knew the word complex trauma when I first finished school. It was sort of like, but what about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like there was a personal pull as well. Professionally, you were curious, but then also there were things you were noticing for yourself and in your own life and relationships maybe that
Yeah.
had you curious.
Yeah, for sure. I remember what was really the driver to NARM was partly my own self. I just thought, there's so much I don't understand about myself and my own anxieties or repeated patterns. And then just feeling like some of the skills I have or how to go there with my clients, I also just felt so helpless about it. And so I was seeking out where could I get more information or what might be a good avenue. And I learned about NARM. It just immediately kind of spoke to me of the early on was like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate the way you're talking about this. And I imagine there's folks who are listening that also have kind of felt into this. And I'll speak from my own experience. Like it felt at times like there was this ambiguousness. There was something, like I knew there was something more, but it felt ambiguous. It felt kind of like I'm not quite sure how to pinpoint this or like what exactly happened. And, I've talked to folks who are like, I had a great childhood. Like, I don't know what's happening here. I didn't have any major things that happen. And I know, again, for myself, like what I can speak to is sometimes there's not a major thing that happens. Sometimes it's just these layers. So anyway, I appreciate the way that you're talking about it because I think it really names what probably a lot of us have felt or are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're walking along this path. You went through the marriage and family therapy route. You got more curious. You found somatic experience that led you to NARM. And now you're studying in Switzerland. So what kind of helped you make that jump? Because that's seems like a big jump.
Yeah. It's because of NARM, but I was on the assisting team and I was really because of how much through active coaching and through the practices and through the training in NARM, it was like, oh, this was really trying to get my therapy needs met from there.
My
And
hand. I've
in
done
one
that.
of the trainings, I think the training team said, we really encourage everyone to be in therapy. And, I think I wasn't as aware of how resistant I was or how afraid maybe. And I had some defenses. I'm not going to find a good therapist or there weren't NARM people in where I was. And I was trying to maybe see somebody in Europe. But anyway, I thought we had talked about depth psychology enough in the training. And I thought, and I'm kind of interested in dreams. So I looked up the Jungian analysts and I looked for one of the oldest people I could find who'd studied, the longest ago. And I didn't know much about it at all, but I started in it just through my own experience and analysis that I just called therapy at that time. But there were things about it that were similar to NARM, but more was happening. And I just thought, what is going on? I'm starting to ask more questions of myself or wonder about things that I think I didn't even know to wonder about. So then I started to think, would I want to study it more? And then kind of went down that path. And there's a lot about Jungian psychology that's quite different than other therapy models. I didn't even know. I mean, myths and fairy tales and collective unconsciousness. And so I've been learning that now. But I think a draw the whole time has just been also what kind of ties to NARM, that is just this very practical aspect of knowing fully ourselves. Like one of the quotes at the beginning that Jung says is, it's not about goodness, it's about wholeness. And that I think is asking, how do we be whole and uncover that in ourselves?
I love that. And I've heard that before, but when you just said it just now, like the hairs on my neck, kind of like that is so important. It's not just about goodness. I grew up thinking goodness was the thing and always trying to be good and look for good. And there's something about that, like you're saying, in this context that feels so important. So was that a piece of it that really drew you in?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'd maybe heard it too, but there was something also that's like, what? My eyes open wide of it's similar to what you're saying is like, oh, I know how to strive to be good and to be better at something and be a good therapist, be a good
Mm-hmm.
person, be a good partner, be a good and so this idea that that wasn't the thing to be striving for made some sense, but sort of opened up this, what could that be like? And this desire about kind of individuation or coming to our whole self and what that is to really know. That's ultimately why I came. It was less to build skills and more like, I want to know. I want to discover
Mm,
this about me.
yeah, that like deep knowing.
Yeah. And find what is my individuation or my own path. Like, what's Megan's way of doing therapy? What's my kind of therapy? Doesn't
Hmm.
not Jungian or NARM, but just, yeah, my way of
Hmm.
integrating all these things.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and that drew me here, and well, maybe it ties to the wholeness. It's humbling. There's a way I think I look at this draw about wholeness and the challenge of how I've been raised or the culturally to be good is really ingrained. And so maybe that goes to what I was saying about to really fully know ourselves, it is unsettling because then I come up against the things that are, in Jung words, would be shadowy. But, I have all these good strategies to avoid certain things or to repress them, in myself. And there's a way it's both beautiful to think about that, but also so uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm. What I'll say about that is that I resonate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been so much discomfort in my kind of unfolding and understanding this wholeness piece in a different way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate you naming that.
Yeah. I think sometimes I can feel a little ideal about it or and maybe what helps bear the discomfort, and I think I see this with my clients, is the really wondering and wanting to know, like, oh, why do I think that's so bad? Or why is it so hard to claim my guilt about this or my desire for this or to feel sad about that? Like, there's so much to wonder about. One thing, the environment I was raised in, people didn't ask a lot of questions about why do you think, oh, what's that about? So it's so automatic to not ask and to just assume something. And I see this with my clients too. We just sort of take something as an answer, like, oh, well, that's that, that's just how it is. And so partly this art of asking questions, both of myself and with my clients, is new to kind of even know how many questions to be in it with them, to be exploring each other and not know exactly and just be in the dark looking
Hmm.
and trying to see what's there. I don't know how that lands or how that sounds. It's maybe hard to even explain, but
No, so I'm not done developing. So I'll just name that, obviously. But I think what I can connect with, there's like that piece before that I can connect with to be in the unknown. I'm like thinking back to how I related to that and how terrifying that felt and can feel. I mean, there's still
yeah,
moments, right? I'm not like done. So there's
yeah,
still those moments where I feel terrified at this idea of like, I may not know how this turns out. There may not be like clarity at the end for me in this whatever it is.
hmm,
But then there's also these moments where I feel like I'm sort of in some ways on the other side of that with certain things. And so it's like I can hold both of those things as you're talking about it. I can sense into how I've related to it in the past and maybe even sometimes in the future I do. But other times where I've felt into like leaning into the unknowing, like how beautiful that can be and to
hmm.
not have this expectation of figuring it out at the end. I don't know if that is landing for you, but that's kind of what's coming up for me as you're talking. There's a duality there.
Yes, yeah. And I think the uncertainty that you're saying and the fear to find things in ourselves. One thing that I love about doing this work is because I see, oh, my clients have fear and I have the fear. And it's like, this is so human of us.
How human of us.
It's so, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I learned so much about myself from my work and my clients because maybe they have just a slightly different spin on something. And Jung says this too, like there's something scary about what we're not so conscious of or we're not aware of in ourselves. So one, there's just the unsettling to interact in the world, but then inside, what's in our inner territory that we repress or suppress or don't even know that isn't so conscious, how scary that is to uncover. That's a little like what we were saying about developmental trauma or relational trauma. It's like nebulous, hard to say there's something, but why is this so scary?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So this is what you've been uncovering. You've been kind of diving into in these last few years.
Yeah, there's something that's the thing that I was surprised by and interested in Jungian psychology that didn't come up in any of my other training, that I just couldn't figure out why fairy tales, why myths, what's that? But because there's something of a human condition in them, or especially if there's one that is symbolic for you or kind of speaks to something, it's like, oh, there's something captured there that is hard to put words to. Symbolism is really important in Jungian psychology. And it's like, yeah, it's the best thing to express something that is unexpressible or that we can't quite explain is what's symbolic. And that's really alive. And so to kind of use that, we have to write a symbol paper before we can begin exams. And I chose a fairy tale as my symbol. And I didn't know why. I just thought this fairy tale is so bizarre to me. What in the world? And it took me months to, work on this tale and use it as the full symbol. And in some ways it was about goodness, or it was about a little what we were talking about, but it really worked on me. I learned some things about myself through trying to understand the things of this fairy tale that was really foreign. I mean, before coming here, this never would have occurred to me.
That's so interesting. Now you have me hooked and I'm dying to know what fairy tale is it one people would be familiar with? Not that you have to tell us, but
it's called Brother Lustig. It's not a very common one, but the thing that I'll just tell you about the very ending is Brother Lustig is a bit of a trickster. At the very end, he's lived his life and he's going to go to hell. He says, well, I have to go to hell or heaven, and I'll go to hell. And the devil doesn't let him in because they've had a kerfuffle and Brother Lustig is already, sort of overpowered the other devils. And so this is the last one who escaped and said, no, we can't let him in. He'll wish all of hell into his knapsack. He has a special knapsack that St. Peter has bestowed upon him. Anyway, then he goes to the gates of heaven where St. Peter is, and St. Peter says, no, you can't come in. You didn't live, you didn't follow these basically goodness. And Brother Lustig has his knapsack that St. Peter has bestowed on him. That's magic. And he says, okay, well, at least take your knapsack. And then Brother Lustig wishes himself in the knapsack, which is the key kind of magical element through the whole thing. And so he's in heaven, and this is the end. And I just thought, what is this tale?
That's so interesting. I'm going to be thinking about that for a few months now. Wow. I was thinking, as you were telling it, I was like, is he going to be a homeless spirit? Like, what happens?
Yeah.
And is that like a fear for all of us at some point? Are we going to be like a homeless spirit? Where do I belong? I mean, I could hear so many layers in that already.
Yes. Yeah, there's so much. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
There's something, I think, to also encounter our stuff, our psyche through symbolism, but through creative ways, through some play. What captures our attention? I mean, these fairy tales, sometimes they really capture something. I've had clients who will just say, this fairy tale helped me understand wicked stepmother. Like, I understand now. My mother is the evil stepmother. This is now I have a place to understand. Otherwise, I couldn't. But why kids, why adults, why we love them. But so that's one thing. But then I think I'm also just thinking creativity and imagination and how that plays into our ways of accessing some information for ourselves too has been fun to play with as I've been here too.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating you bringing this forth because I've been curious about it, but it's not something I've done any sort of deep dive into. And I think you're helping me with my own curiosity around
Mm.
what is there? What is that? Actually, I have children, and so I've, read some fairy tales and some kind of book series or whatever that sort of are in that realm. To them, it's interesting to see, at least with my children, some are curious about it and some aren't. Some feel drawn to that kind of world. Does every child have their own relationship to it, or are there things that get turned off? Like, what is that about us as humans that we may or may not be drawn to certain fairy tales or stories, or I don't know. There's something there for me, is what I'm saying. You're bringing some curiosity out in me.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting question. Like, what did we love, or what do we love now? But I'm thinking, I didn't love fairy tales as a kid. Even I loved some of them. I liked, but like The Secret Garden, that was one of my favorites. Like what kind of pulls you in? And then there is something interesting about that. What is the attraction, or what speaks to us? What's reflected to us in those kinds of stories or tales, or kind of timeless things? Yeah.
So these are elements that you've been exploring in your work there. And I'm curious to know, are there any things that you've seen can overlap at all with the work that you did with NARM? Or I don't know how you're holding that. I'm just curious to hear what you notice.
Yeah, I think something they share, the language is so different, but is seeing more about ourselves, like the questions in NARM, and even our survival strategies, like what adaptations we've made to kind of adapt to our families, to collective life. That's really a key part of Jungian psychology too, is that's kind of the first half of life, Jung said, is about adaptation to the collective. And the second half of life, he saw more as this opportunity to adapt to the inner, to ourselves and to our inner life that tends to get, for good reason, kind of put aside or put on hold. And I don't know, maybe I think with NARM, the questions and the explorations of one, just even what we want for ourselves is a hard enough question about what we're desiring. That's like so already rife with tension oftentimes to even get there, to name it. But that is pulling in the inner. Sometimes that comes into conflict with collective values or norms, or, anyway, it gets into the territory. Of course, it's so vast, but of what I might want for myself, and then what is the barriers to that. There's really quite a lot of overlap.
Yeah. My question, because you were talking about this piece, how did you say it? Like the first half of life, say that piece again, because there was something there that I was curious about and I wasn't quite sure how to say it.
Yeah, first half of life, Jung would say, is really about adapting to the collective, to our environment, to culture, to social, to our families. And the second half of life is more about adapting to our own inner self, like things that for many of us we kind of put aside in order to well fit in, or we resist ways our families wanted us to be or culture wanted us to be, that the second half of life, once we've attained some amount of, working life, or kind of established ourselves, had families, or have jobs, that then allows the time, then becomes this time to be thinking more what's going on inside me. And sometimes conflicts then arise of the ways that, I haven't ever known this about myself. I only did this because it was expected of me.
Yes.
And so then there's some conflicts and tension.
Some conflict there. Okay, that was the piece I was holding, because I was just thinking how, like, that seems so common that folks are in an office, working with someone, therapist, practitioner of some kind, and they're kind of unwinding all of these patterns that you're naming, like adaptations from that first part of life, where maybe it was family culture, maybe it was just society in general, or some kind of religious, influence. And they're kind of unwinding that and unlearning and also learning themselves simultaneously. And that process can feel so complex, this unwinding, simultaneously winding, if that makes sense, like learning ourselves. I'm sort of speaking of my own process. Like that's what it's felt like. There's a lot of unwinding and figuring out, what do I want to retain of this? Because not all of it's, something I want to toss out, but there are parts that I see are no longer useful to me personally. And there's parts that I, like you named before, I don't remember how you said it so beautifully, but just like discovering ourselves, like, who am I really? What do I actually want? What fits for me and my heart and my experience? And that's kind of what was coming up for me as you were talking about that, like this visual image of like simultaneously unwinding something while I'm winding the other side of the bobbin or something. You know what I mean?
I like that. Yeah.
And it can feel chaotic. It has felt chaotic. Again, I'm just talking about my own experience. That's what I can speak to. It can feel so chaotic to be simultaneously undoing or unlearning or, kind of setting aside things that no longer feel right to me as a human, and simultaneously be figuring out this process of figuring out what really does work for me.
Yeah. And the conflicts or perceived conflicts, but oftentimes they can be real. Like, what does it mean if I think differently than, or if I've kind of been this way as an adaptation and didn't really realize. And so now I'm discovering, is that even what I like? And what if not? Or I'll have some clients, this is more common than not, of like, I don't really know myself, and sort of a pain or a judgment about it, as opposed to sort of, yeah, and who is it? Like, there's an open question there to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But for many of us, it does raise the possibility of conflicts, because what does this mean for the people I'm around? And
that's right.
Will that work if I'm changing or uncovering certain things about myself that have maybe been hidden a long time or kind of been buried for good reason, because that was, useful for a time. But I guess to say, yeah, there is this, it's like, oh yeah, I want to know, like, oh, I can tend to this. This is, I want to know. And there's reasons we haven't.
Yeah. It can be terrifying.
Yeah.
That conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we intuitively know there will be conflict if we kind of reveal what's underneath all of these patterns that we've used to stay in connection.
Exactly.
To maintain, the environment. And that can feel really scary. And that's real, because sometimes the relationships do change or end, or environments it can really rock the boat. So that's real.
Yeah. Yeah. Exile, I have been interested also just in how we exile both ideas from ourselves if they would present a conflict in some way. So we that would be the way we suppress it, but that happens really in groups, in collective groups, that you wouldn't get to belong or something if you have something that's in disagreement. So this is, it's also just such human self-preservation, This is our very instinctual instinct for self-preservation, but then also our instinct for creativity and aliveness and growth in ourselves, being our own selves, that then there's sometimes tension there.
Yeah. As you were saying that, your fairy tale just rose up to me. There was this moment when I was like having compassion for this guy. Like, he's going to be a homeless spirit. Where is he going to go? And I mean, I think maybe we've all felt some sense of that. Like, where do I belong? What is my place?
Totally. And how, to really be oneself, or it does kind of risk that. I think that's why so many of us, we adapt, of course, to belong. That's really necessary. Yeah. Oh, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking how he wished himself into the bag and got in. He's like, guess what? I belong there.
Totally. This is very clever. This is the tricksiness. This is also this important kind of archetype or quality.
I love that. Yeah. I need to go read that one. It's not one I was familiar with, but I think I need to get familiar.
It continues to work on me too. So
yeah. So Megan, as you're kind of appreciate, you're just kind of letting yourself talk about these different pieces and things that you've been exploring. And I mean, I'd love to hear more if there's anything else that you're curious about or sharing in your exploration and the work that you're doing. And
Yeah, actually what comes to mind now that how this does or does not relate to NARM, but I think it does in a way the relational aspect, relationship as in the therapy process. But another thing I've been struck by as I'm studying depth psychology is there's a lot of attention to transference and countertransference. And NARM also
Mm-hmm.
pays attention to this more than I'd gotten in my other training. And this has been another territory that's just been so rich, but how significant the relationship in the therapy room is. I think there's a way I didn't, maybe because the training is so different and the therapy is different. When you're doing more depth work and asking some of the questions, I don't know, it's not like it's more vulnerable because all therapy is, but of course it's evoking the transference to our therapist is like, I want you to smile back at me. I want, what do I project on you? My parents, our lovers, our partners, all kinds of things in that relational field. But I think this I've been really appreciating and growing in and learning is how to pay attention and bring it up in therapy when appropriate. Of course, it's not always, but things play out between us. I think Brad says this in the trainings, like people do therapy like they do life.
Right.
Of course, all our strategies come out, but including in this relationship and how important it is that we are in together. Like this relational dynamic is so sacred is what I want to say, but there's nothing like that in my experience. And I think I've been coming to hold that more, I guess, really with a lot of tenderness or a lot of care and attention. And of course, there's some tension in that too. Like, do I want it to be that important? No. Sometimes no. Sometimes yes. But for both parties, like, oh, it's maybe also the love, like a feeling of love or how irritation, frustration
Mm-hmm.
that, I'm disappointing because I don't, all these things that play out there. But I guess that territory has also been of really interest to me. And I think it got sparked more with NARM because I think it's some depth work is happening. And that's what opens up is this relational field. How much maybe it's only that I'm holding it even internally to understand how significant it is. But that's been some fruitful territory also.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just kind of letting that land with me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To be affected by my clients, to feel how important and that person is for me in my therapy. Like, I guess it speaks to also how do we do we acknowledge it? Do we not acknowledge it? That our own strategies and relational patterns will come out in that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're kind of helping me think of these things in a different way. Particularly in this moment, I'm thinking of the countertransference, the transference piece. When do we name it? When do when is it something of ours that we, need to tend to outside of the therapy room, in supervision or consultation or something? When is it going to be grist for the mill in the moment with the client? There's a few of my own situations right now that I'm kind of holding as I'm thinking about that. And yeah, I'm just appreciating the curiosity and the putting it on the table to consider, which really sounds, again, very NARM aligned and clearly what you've been exploring more deeply.
Yeah, and I'm such in the same place as you. Like, yeah, I don't know, but these questions and the importance of it, or this is important. I want to pay attention here. Yeah,
yeah, I want to pay attention here. Yeah. Well, we still have a few minutes left. I want to just provide a little bit of space if there's anything else that you'd like our listeners to know about your own process here as you're integrating NARM and this depth work. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think what I'd said at the beginning of wanting listeners to know about being unsettled and seeing ourselves as we really are. And maybe just that of like, oh, there's something to pay attention to here. I think I like that. I didn't even know I said it till you said it back, but yeah, that's the beginning. I think that is what started with NARM that's now carrying through is I started to notice much more. There's something I want to pay attention to here that that previously I sort of looked over or skated over. And I think this is common if my clients and myself are are an indication, but it's so easy to kind of glide over something. And sometimes I just think, oh my gosh, I could have every day there could be so many things that I could pay attention to, but to sort of, oh, what has an energy, what lands or what did unsettle me that then I quick covered up, or anyway, that paying attention is the beginning and maybe only the beginning. And that's fine. Just like, oh, what is it that I could wonder about that? Or I was unsettled, or, I think that's so big and so, I don't know, such the start.
Yeah. Can I tell you what comes up for me as you're sharing that?
Yes, please.
I'm thinking about, and you named this earlier, or maybe I did, or maybe we both did, I don't know. But this piece around, I was raised that it was important to be good and to know things.
Yeah.
And what if I didn't know? And one of my strategies was if I didn't know, that got pushed away. That got kind of skipped over, like what you're naming. Like I learned to not be curious about a lot of things because if I didn't know it, it opened up this like Pandora's box that was too scary. Mm-hmm. And so if I didn't know about it, then I was going to go this other direction. And so as you were saying that, I was thinking about how I relate to this fogginess now, that like sometimes I'll lose words or I lose thoughts or something suddenly kind of becomes foggy. And I think what my own process has been in all of this is learning to pay attention. There's something here to be curious about. Something is here. I don't know what it is. And often for me, that fogginess is pointing to there's like a rearranging here. There's something here that maybe you don't know. And it's okay to lean into that and to not know something. So that, I don't know if that's helpful at all to hear what your exploration, what that brings up in me is that this piece around there's something to pay attention to here. That's me leaning into something that is always uncomfortable. I mean, I can't think of a time when it's really comfortable to explore territory that feels really unknown, but that feels important to me. That's what I'm kind of learning here in this conversation. And I just want to name that. I've really appreciated that about what you're bringing.
Yeah. Well, it's so nice to have you say this back, but yes. And I'm nodding like, yeah, to not know something is so uncomfortable, and to kind of get away from it. And maybe that, yeah, there's something else there. Yeah, I really like how you said that. So yeah, so nice to just get to talk together and see what spurs. And
I love it. Have these conversations. Well, Megan, this has just been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time and being, across the seas and making this work in your schedule and spending the time with our community. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to continue following your journey and hearing how things. So you've been there for a few years. You have a few years left. This is a 6-year program, right? You said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been so nice. And I really like staying connected with NARM. So I feel it's so nice to just get to talk together and be in touch like this. So
I love it. Well, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more information about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at complextraumatrainingcenter.com/transforming trauma. You can also connect with us in other ways. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. As a mental health professional, your commitment to healing and growth inspires us. We at the Complex Trauma Training Center are committed to supporting you in your well-being and success. That's why we're honored to invite you to our Space Program 2025, an inner development program of support and self-discovery for therapists on the personal, interpersonal, and transpersonal levels. This interactive experiential learning program is designed to support self-care and self-discovery for therapists, exploring internally, relationally, and transpersonally. CTTC faculty will welcome you into a professional community of therapists that are seeking to create greater effectiveness and resilience in our professional lives. As CTTC faculty Brad Kammer says, the intent is that this program will help us not only become more effective therapists, but also love our work more. Please visit complextraumatrainingcenter.com and secure your spot in the 2025 SPACE program. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Elisa Sponseller for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.